HIV. The defendants' lawyers are now preparing an appeal.
Well, Bulgaria's Foreign Affairs Minister says the children were infected with the virus before the nurses started working at the hospital.
The decision of the Libyan court was very much disappointing because the court didn't take into consideration all the very, very clear evidences about the innocence of the Bulgarian nurses. We are also very much concerned, and Bulgaria is part of the efforts of the international community helping the children that are infected with the AIDS virus. But again, making the linkage between this case and the work of the Bulgarian nurses is absolutely unfounded and unfair.
U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice met with the Bulgarian Foreign Affairs Minister earlier in Washington, and she said while the U.S. government is concerned for the welfare of the kids, the medical workers should be freed.
We understand very much that there are children who have suffered, and we are concerned for their suffering and that of their families. But we also are concerned that these medics will be allowed to go home at the earliest possible date. These are people who deserve to go home, and we are very disappointed at the outcome of this verdict. And I want you to know, Minister, that we will continue to work for their early return to Bulgaria.
Well, the medical workers have been held in Libya for 7 years. This ruling is actually a retrial. The 6 were already sentenced to death once before. Well, they say they've endured harsh conditions in prison. One Bulgarian nurse says beatings and electric shocks left her partially paralyzed and unable to talk for months. Another nurse says she also endured torture and later tried to commit suicide. Well, Libyan prosecutors say they found bags of blood at the home of 47-year-old Cristiana Valcheva, but she proclaims her innocence. Well, the Palestinian doctor convicted in the case says Libyan police fabricated the charges. Well, joining me now from Los Angeles to discuss the case is Libya expert Omar Turbi. Mr. Turbi, will the Libyans, do you believe, carry out the death sentence that was announced today?
Well, it's a very sad day it's a very sad day to see that the verdict was handed down today. The important part about this, and that should be comforting to us, is that I don't believe that the Libyans will ever carry the death penalty against these 5 nurses and the 1 Palestinian doctor, simply because Libya cannot afford politically and its relations with the world around it to carry the case. It has unfortunately become political. It is become a political case outside of Libya. But let's remember one thing is that it is a political case inside Libya as well. The government of Libya...
Okay, all right, let's remember that. There were, of course, celebrations in the streets, weren't there, when the sentence was announced today. You've spoken to some of the parents of these children infected. What are they saying?
Well, the parents of the children do know, even though the death sentence, they do not expect it to be carried out. And, the unfortunate part about this, regardless of how good or bad the legal due process is being carried in Libya, Libya, unfortunately, does not have the precedence of credibility in carrying or conducting cases of this type. So what I hope to see is perhaps really to solve this problem is to compensate the families of the children, take care of them, establish a fund to carry for the kids inside and outside Libya. And I think eventually these nurses will be released. What I hope to do is perhaps promote the idea of maybe the Libyan leadership provide some sort of pardon. But I think if we take care of the families and the children as far as medical care and compensation, and maybe try to work with the Libyan regime, not really push it against the wall to to release these nurses. They're not going to be
All right.
able to release them under the circumstances.
Let's discuss two issues that have come up during this trial. One, that there are suggestions that the Libyan government has been withholding evidence in this trial, and two, that they are using this case effectively as leverage to win the release of one of the Libyan men who was sentenced to life in prison in The Hague for blowing up the Pan Am Flight 104. Let's start with the incriminating evidence. What do you know of that?
Well, you know, that's a good point. I think I did hear of this type of information roaming around. I don't know, and for what reason would the Libyan government withhold any evidence that might incriminate it. I believe that the Libyan government has been forthright, have been providing as much information as they can. But frankly, there has been some talk about them withholding information. Some members of the Libyan known figures like Saif al-Islam really believes in his heart that perhaps the cause of these kids' problems had to do with lack of care at the hospitals. I don't want to speak for him, but that's what I heard. The second point of your question, meaning that the Libyans would like to use this case to leverage the release of Abdel Basit, who's in jail for planting a bomb on the Lockerbie case. Yes, the Libyans have raised that issue. Unfortunately, I believe it's a mistake to connect these two cases together, and I don't believe the Libyans are doing that at this point. So what we hope for, frankly, to get this behind us is that the European community and perhaps the United States as well provide as fast as possible compensation to the families, set up a process by which these kids are well taken care of, and then I think it's going to work itself out, perhaps taking the case out. Maybe we can try to get maybe the leader of Libya, Gaddafi, to provide some kind of pardon to these nurses and the Palestinian doctor. But I think it is a domestic problem for Gaddafi and his regime to do pardon the nurses and the doctor, because
we're going and with that said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave it there. We thank you, and I think you make your point very clearly. We thank you very much indeed for joining us. Omar Turbi, a Libya expert there based in the US, and you can get the latest developments on this story on the website cnn.com, of course, /international. That's cnn.com/international. More news headlines to follow. First, though, early Tuesday, the Thai central bank moved to penalise foreign investments, but investors penalised Thailand's stock markets instead. In its worst day ever, the Thai exchange plunged by almost 15%. And that was Tuesday, of course. Thai officials reversed course, but it was too late to stop the sell-off. The sharp decline brought back fears of the 1997 Asian financial crisis, which was triggered when the baht plummeted. We will have a report on Thailand's market crash later in the programme. We